Dziękuję, że zechcieliście przyjść na spotkanie z panem Billem Price'em, który wygłosi w języku angielskim wykład Future of Social Economic Development in the Era of Technological Transformation. Przetłumaczyliśmy to na język polski w ten sposób, że to jest perspektywa rozwoju społeczno-gospodarczego w okresie przechodzenia w erę odmiennych form pracy ludzkiej. Mr. Professor, I am very.
I realize that they can see everything I'm doing.
I'm very
all right.
Honored to welcome you in our university.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Floor is for you.
Let me stand for a minute and look at the people that are here.
Okay. Thank you, Bill, that you are here. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Price is a very inspiring person. He was working in Los Alamos during Second World War in creation of atomic bomb. He was the advisor of Jimmy Carter, President of the United States. He was creating the new market in post-Soviet Union countries, in Ukraine, and work for a private sector in the United States. So he's a very inspiring person with a lot of knowledge, and I think that we will listen to a very interesting lecture. We will have short break, but it will be a surprise because professor will decide when. I think that we have 2 hours of interesting topic. Thank you that you are here, and thank you, Professor. The floor is yours.
Before I start my lecture, which of course is in English, I will look at you to see how many of you understand, and I will try to keep my words. I think they hear me. Oh, but I need this device. Okay. But in case you do not, or you have questions, you can interrupt at any time. Is that clear? Just say, all right. I thought I'd start by giving you an insight into my connection to Poland. I have a connection to Poland. My father was born in Poland. He was born in a town near Kielce, a small farming village. A big family, 11 children in this farming village. And my wife, Danuta, and I visited, let's share the right name? This little farming. So I have a connection to Poland. I have a second connection to Poland. I did a major economic development project in Ukraine and wanted to start a similar project in Poland. What year was that, Danuta?
2001, 2003.
And I came here in 2001 with an idea. I had been in Katowice and I had been in Krakow. I was familiar with Silicon Valley, and I proposed to an organization, what was that, GAP?
Górnośląska Agencja Przekształceń Państwowych.
I proposed that we develop a Silicon Valley road between Katowice and Krakow. I thought that would be a wonderful project looking at the science of the future. But I must say that after spending many hours and days, I could convince no one that such a project made sense. The universities did not cooperate either, and so the project of making a Silicon Valley between Katowice and Krakow did not materialize. Not all my projects succeed. But look what has happened. Another 20 years later, I'm here and I'm talking to you about a new project. And I'm not sure that Poland will receive this new idea very easily either, because it really does require a different mindset, about what an economy is and how it functions. And it is difficult in countries like Poland and others that were formerly in the part of the Soviet Union economy to quickly leave that past. And to the extent Poland has left that past, it wants to enjoy what Western Europe has had right along, an economy with cars. I was surprised when I looked into it that Poland has the 5th largest per capita of cars in Europe. Now, why would Poland want to have so many cars? The 5th, and not only have you got more cars than most countries in Europe per capita, but you also have more cars on dealer car lots than most countries have. And so apparently there's a very close affection that Poland has for this stage of its development, an affection for the automobile, which the West, of course, has had a long time. Whether there is a future for the automobile in the economy that I'm talking about is not clear. Maybe not clear to you, but it is very clear to me. When I drive around Katowice and when I drive around Krakow, there's hardly a place to put a car. You've got cars everywhere, and they're just standing there. I don't know how a country can afford so many cars that just stand around. Then, when you look at the Polish economy as it is measured by organizations like the World Bank or went by OECD, you rank only in the 30th or 40th in terms of some of your development, social development. So you have a country that ranks around 30 or 40 in social development, but ranks 5th in the number of cars in Europe. Now, there's something strange about such an economy. All right? And whether such an economy is a lasting economy or not, you will think about as I'm talking about my subject. But I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here and to recall these 2 previous visits that I had to Poland, visiting my father's birthday and coming back and trying to see if we can create a large industrial section, innovative scientific industrial section, which did not succeed. Let us start by something that I hope will fascinate you. You'll recognize the conductor.
I think tonight we are truly writing history and we are writing the future of robotics applications.
Let's go on and skip the verbum.
flexibility of the arms of Yumi is absolutely unthinkable, not even incredible, unthinkable for a machine. It is absolutely fantastic. It will be very useful because in this time when conductors are going to be one day in New York, the other day in London, the other day in Paris and whatever, they will never be along with the orchestra all the time. But you will see that the gesture of Yumi is another level. It goes far beyond the simple Taktstock, as they say in German. It is something much more evident, it is something more artistic, and the flexibility of the machine is basic for this. Absolutely fantastic.
This is the finale.
La donna è mobile qual piuma al vento, muta d'accento e di pensiero.
Watching Yumi while playing, I realized that he's very smooth. It's very smooth. You know, it's not a kind of metronome, but it really moves and it gives something back, and it's very easy to follow him.
All right. This gives you a little insight of where we are in 2020. 2020. Imagine Yumi in 2050. I don't think there will be a conductor around that will be able to match his repertoire. Maybe not be able to wink, but you notice at one point there, when there was a note sounded that was off beat, the Yumi knew and he pointed that this way. All right. So we're talking about a world which is, at least I am, which is 2050. I'm not talking about 2025 or 2030. Poland in 2030 will still be grappling with how to catch up with Western Europe. Actually, you shouldn't be doing that. You know that in Africa, the Africans don't want to start where Western Europe started in 1800. You understand that in Africa, we don't start by having a telephone that has a dial. How many of you used a telephone that has a dial? Okay, many of you passed that era. So the developing countries tend to skip over much of the industrial development that Western Europe has gone through. But there is a mindset in Western Europe, especially Eastern Europe, that they have to experience the Western Europe before they can get on. And that is delaying considerably the development of Eastern countries, Eastern and Central European countries, including Poland. The inability to skip over the Western portion of the development and go right on to what the new era is like. And I want to talk a little bit about what that new era is like. Let's see. I've talked about my connection to Poland. I want to say that this project that I'm going to show you started about 2016 or 15. I'm an engineer and consultant, and I was consulting in different Central and Eastern European countries on economic development, and as I mentioned, also attempted to do so here. In 2015, I had a rest period in my now hometown of Vienna, Austria, and was invited to a forum, a conference. and there was a prominent Czech economist who talked about the future. And when I listened to that, I was convinced that cannot be the future. And I decided to start a project. Project started here. Now let me say something about why that is important word here. I'm going to talk about the future of work. I'm going to talk about the future of work and the transition that is taking place in the nature of work that humans do, as you will see. But we have to understand what the word work means, because there are other words like jobs that people toss around, and is a job work, or is work a job, or are they all the same? And so that you will understand me, I have to explain the difference, because that will be important in the presentation. Work, the word in English, work, I don't know in Polish, the word work in English, is a generic word. I am working right now. Do you believe me that when I say I'm working right now? You've got to believe it. This is work. It took work to get here. It took work to prepare. It took work for me to look at you and to make this presentation. I am working. If I had not decided to come here and I would have rejected Boris's invitation, I would not be working. Maybe I'd be doing something else, maybe not. You understand that work originates in the mind. We've got to get that clear. Work does not originate in a factory. Work does not originate in an economy. Work originates in the mind. If you want to draw a picture and you get a piece of paper, then you're motivated to get the paper, but you need a pencil, and you're motivated to get the pencil, and you're motivated to do the picture, and if you do the picture, you're working. Isn't that clear? And if you decided not to draw a picture and just sit and do nothing, then maybe you're not working, but your body is working. Do you know that when you sit like this right now, if you did not move, your body would consume 50 calories per hour. And the consumption of calories is work. Your body inside works. So work is generic. We cannot escape it. We can do more or less depending on how we are motivated in our minds to work. Most of us have learned in the industrial economy that our minds do not have to be much motivated for work because somebody else creates the work for us. So there's a restaurant and they need somebody. It doesn't take much energy. You go in and you apply and somebody gives you work to do. And so during the last 200 or 300 years, the industrial economy has been a place where we don't need much imagination. All we need is some muscle. You will see that. Maybe a little bit of this. And somebody's got a job for you, and you've got work to do. A paid work is a job. So let's get that straight. Work is everywhere. If you get paid for work, then you fall into the economy, and that's what I call wage work. Wage, it's money work or a job. So that distinction needs to be clear so that you can understand what we're now going to show you. But remember, work starts here. We're never out of work. When the newspapers say, do robots and other intelligence deprive us of work? They cannot deprive you of work. Every time you decide to do something and you act on it, you will be working. You may not be working in the economy. And you may say, well, if I'm not working in the economy, how do I live? That's a good question, and we'll talk about that. But you cannot be deprived of work. is that I hope that's a very important message. Now, as I said in 2000, just a second, where's my, what was it? Oh, there. Can you get the document out and do not, das, was du mir gezeigt hast, wo ich nur einen habe. And so in 2015, nein, das from the council, das du mir gezeigt hast. In 2015, having heard that conference, a discussion on the future of the European economy, I decided to create a council. That was work. Just the way Boris has told us about a council he's creating. And that council met for 2 years and produced a document.
It's not here.
Ja, du hast es doch raus. Here. That, it met for 2 years, and it was a high-level council. It had the president of the central bank of Austria. It had the president of the largest university, technical university. So it was a very prominent group. And for an American outsider to try to organize a prominent group of Austrians wasn't easy. So it was work. But 2 years later, after meeting at the central bank offices, discussing on the future of work, we produced a document and at a conference which Boris attended called Economy in Transition, Are We Prepared? And in this document, it's in English, there are 20 points that we identify about a future economy, an economy going into 2030 and beyond, for which we are not prepared. Either not prepared economically, not prepared from education, not prepared ethically, and not prepared legally for the things that will happen as we go into that new phase of an economy in transition. That document was prepared in 2017. Now we're in 2021. And the conference that we had, that Boris attended a couple of weeks ago, at this time called a colloquium, was Economy in Transition, how to go on, how to proceed. And so I'm going to talk about how to proceed. I'm going to skip discussions on the problems that we will face, that was, and move right on. Now, if you have some concerns about why why I see this transition, I'm prepared to answer questions about the problems that gave rise to this transition. But I want to talk about, and I want you to think about life in 2050 when Yumi will be all over the world conducting. They will be conducting, and major orchestras can choose whether they want Yumi or whether they want a human to conduct. Yumi is not very expensive. Once you have him, he works day and night, and he gets no vacations. Other conductors, humans, are not so inexpensive. There will be trade-offs that are made. And if you are not a conductor any longer, then what will you be? We can't all be programmers. Now, let's look at That symbol that you see was my way of characterizing that there isn't much time between the hand on the left side and the hand on the right side. We think there is much time, but there isn't. In Poland, you're way behind. In Austria, we are also way behind, but Poland is even further behind. The Robot Density Index, which is an index that measures the extent to which robotics is unused, has Austria somewhere in the 24th category. There are 23 countries that have a larger penetration of robotics and the intelligence that goes with robotics. But Poland is not even on the first 40 list. So you are still living in essentially what was the 20th century Europe. Except, of course, you have this fascination for cars. So there isn't much time. Would any of you have take a guess where the greatest penetration of robotics is in the world? Anybody?
China.
No, China is the fastest growing in robotics, but not the largest penetration yet.
Germany.
Germany is number 5.
Brazil.
Pardon me?
Brazil.
No, Brazil is low. South Korea and Japan are the leading in penetration, and China has set as a goal that it will completely industrialize its economy with robots by 2050. Now here is a country that has lots of workers potentially, huge population, but it is set to fully industrialize its economy with robotics by 2050. Okay. I don't know whether anybody in Poland debates about where they want to be in 2050 and whether that includes robotics or any of the other terms that are used, terms like AI or expert systems. So time is standing still in Poland, but I'm talking about where it is moving. To help you understand, the central question that needs to be addressed into the future is, what is or remains human purposeful? Do you know what the term purposeful means? What the purpose is? Yeah. What remains human, purposeful, gainful, where you have a means of living, and consummate work within the context of an era economic and civil, new era economic. What is work in a new era surrounded by all these new forms that these systems will give us? One of the things that will trouble you is what we call them. We need a new language. Some of my friends want to call a robot a machine. How many of you believe a robot is a machine? Only one person believes a robot is a machine. Well, if it isn't a machine, what do you believe it is? Okay, but that's one of the things we have to think about, because they will be all around us and they will take different forms. This intelligence can look like a group of wires with a lot of aluminum and look like that. But if you want to take a look at the robots that my friend in Berlin produces, they are beautiful ladies, when Marilyn Monroe walks in here as a robot, you will know that it's Marilyn Monroe. She smiles like Marilyn Monroe. She looks like Marilyn Monroe. She has a dress on like Marilyn Monroe. And if you blow from underneath it, it will come up and you might see something. Or it might look like a vending machine. Do you know what a vending machine is? Where you buy Coca-Cola, you put money in, and we now have a vending machine where a lady goes to the machine and wants a Coca-Cola. She puts her money in, pushes Coke, and the machine says, I'm sorry, I cannot serve your Coke. Your watch tells me that your diabetic level is high and there is no Coke for you. She says, I want a Coke. And the machine says, sorry, we will inform your doctor. And the machine sends a message to the doctor. The doctor sends back a message to her phone on the wrist and says, the machine says you cannot have a Coke. Listen to the machine. Okay? We're going to be in that. Or we live in a world where I travel on the metro in Vienna, and I see a child 2 years old with what in its hand? Let's see if I can get mine out. 2 years old, and it has this thing in its hand, and it's busy going like this. I am convinced that in the world of the future, if any of you ladies have children and you will say something to that child will check it out and find out that you have had it wrong. So we are living in a world where we will be in competition, whether it looks like a robot or looks like a machine or whatever it looks like, it will be smart. It will have more memory than you will have, or at least it will have, if not more memory, although these new supercomputers will be. But in any event, granting that you may have more memory, your recall from that will not come anywhere close to the speed to the recall. So we are living in a world where we will have smart things all around us, in some ways seeming even more intelligent if we know how to define intelligence. Okay.
In case of your statement.
Pardon me?
In case of your statement about that, can we treat robots as a machine? I think present time, yes, because until they don't have any human size, like emotions, like their own decisions, until we control them, we can treat them as a machine, as helpful things that not controlling us, but we controlling them and we creating them.
Well, I will get to that point as in my presentation, and you will see, okay?
Okay.
Where we are in the development, we can speculate. You see where we are with human today, right? Today he looks like a machine. In 20 years from now, he won't look like a machine. It'll be Yumi with a nice suit on and a tie and a coat on, and he will be a sensitive person. And if you tell Yumi he didn't conduct well, he says, can you conduct better?
Okay, but until we controlling them, until we creating them, until we use them in case of help to create much more powerful, much more smarter, much more clever, we own them. So basically we are now on the top of the chain.
Well, the difficulty, and I don't know you by name, but the difficulty is you're putting it into the context, as you said, today. But let me say what's going on today in another part of the global geography. I don't know if you know that, but in Japan, there are several thousand men who are married to female robots. Married, legally married. The laws permit a marriage between a robot and a, what we call, humanoid female. what has happened is, and in one of those cases, the man died and left his estate to whom? His humanoid robot. We now have in Japan a free person. If you don't want to call it a person, it looks like a person. It has its own bank account, and it can go and buy and shop and wears very nice dresses.
But anyway, it's worked by a written program, by a written script that shows their emotions, reactions, actions. All of this is written by a human, by a code.
Well, let's not. The purpose of my talk is economics, and not. But I'm not sure what you're saying is correct. First of all, when we have a little child and it's 2 days old, it is born tabula rasa. It is clear, and the mother starts indoctrinating it. All right. So we're writing the child's program. And by the time the child is 3, it knows what it likes and doesn't like from where. It's picked it up from the mother and father. So we're writing programs for our lives all of the time. The question the question really is, the programs are we writing, whether it's a human or others, are they beneficial to us? Will they help create a better life for us? Or are we going to lose control? But we've also lost control many times over human. World War I, World War II, all examples in recent times where humans left. Okay. But let us leave the technology and go to the economics. So, we want to know what is a purposeful life in an era when other things are doing the things that we used to do. What's our role? And that deals with the question, what makes humans distinctly human? Do you understand what I asked? Wie sagt man distinctly? Genau. We have to learn what makes humans distinctly human. Unless we learn that, the smart things all around us will either try to dominate us or we will try to compete with these smart things and we will lose. The only thing that will save us is if we know what makes a human distinctly human, that nothing can take that away from us. But that cannot be being a policeman, and it cannot be being a programmer, and it cannot be being a doctor. But what is it that makes us distinctly human in a world around us where other things compete with us and compete with our intelligence? And there lies the future of education. Future of education isn't what I studied, mechanical engineering. There is no future in that. But if I want to survive in the future of 2050, I've got to figure out what makes me, me, and no matter how many smart robots and good-looking robots are in this room, I still know who I am, and I have a sense that I belong here. So we have to address, okay. Now, the second part says, what economic tenets and public policy measures apply to forms of essential communal work now not within the sphere of the job economy? Okay, and I already addressed that. The job economy is not going to be the basis for giving everybody a job. The European Union says that it would like to have no unemployment, or at least very little unemployment. That means to say they would like all working age men to be working. And then the European Union says, well, if the men are working, the women have a right to work too. And so they want all the women that are working age women have the right to work, wage work. Then they also say, but those young people that are coming out of college or that are from 16 years on, they all have a right to work and they should all have a job too. And then the European Union says, because we are all living longer, we must work longer. So we have to have all the old people find the work. And guess what? Industry that produces robots will produce about 40 million of them by 2050 in Europe, and they all want to work, and they will work because you paid for them to work. Now tell me who is all going to have jobs in that kind of an economy. It's not in the cards that we're going to do that. So we're going to have to find work for us that isn't in the job economy. That's not tough because the work comes from here. Question is, how do we live from it? Now, let us go into some history just to there. That's how organized work started. You know what you're seeing? It's Egypt, and they're building pyramids. And what was our work? We were slaves. Slaves, you see them. And what did we use? We weren't paid, or they were not paid, they were just given meals, to think. They knew what they had to do. We were paid for what? Men were. For our muscle. So we've got to understand that we as humans started our relation to work with muscle. Okay? So humans are a machine, a muscle machine. That's how we started our work, and that's why we as slaves were useful. If we would have been thin and tiny, we would not have been a useful member of the economy. So that is our first experience of organized work. Before that, we've done random work, each individual doing his work, but in Egypt, they organized the work into a workforce, a workforce. It didn't take long before that organized workforce looked like this. Okay, there it took only about 2,000 years to get from the first picture to the second, 2,000 years. But that's what work looked like around 1700 to early 1800. Again, we were paid for what? Nobody in that picture was paid for what he had here. They were paid for what we had here. So you have to understand our origin. Or the notion that we are getting paid for what is up here is relatively new. Let us go on. It took some time, but pretty soon we looked like that. What was the change? We now moved into what looks like a factory setting. We decided that we moved under one roof, we put things together, and so we looked like what you see here, a scramble of men still primarily concerned with muscle in their work, but they needed to do some thinking. Why is one of these pipes not fit with the other? And so we began early on to do some what we would now think low level, although it isn't so level when we do our own repairs, but we had to do some thinking with repairs. And it was not primarily paid for us to think, it was primarily made for us to do. And that is in the transition from agriculture. We left the farm, somebody said, leave the farm and go to work in the town. And these are the people who are all farmers. These were all farmers who left the farm so they could earn a little money, job, wages, in a factory. It didn't take long that the factories began to look like this. And now we accumulated a large number of people in factories. Take a look at, whole rows of them in factories. And it didn't take much longer that these people were studied. I don't know if you are familiar with time and motion studies. Do you know what I mean by time and motion study? What they did is there were at this time men who were paid with a stopwatch and who saw how the women moved the belt, moved this and moved that, and wrote down, this motion takes 2 seconds, this motion takes 3 seconds, this motion takes 5 seconds, and then went back to their shop and said, we need to change the motion. If we eliminate this motion, we save 2 seconds. If we eliminate that motion, and so then everybody was indoctrinated and they behaved just like a robot. The work and time period was a period when if you wanted that job, you moved the hand that way and not that way, and if you didn't learn it, that you'd lose your job. Okay, so this was the period when we highly automated the human endeavor, and it began to look just like a robot. This man would say to the person, we're not paying you to think, we're just paying you to move the hand like this and do it in 5 seconds. Pretty soon it became more dense and you began to look like that. One person next to the other. You also began to see that an old man sits next to a young child. It didn't matter. Anybody that could move and do the work. And so you see a child 12 sitting next to a person that's 25, as long as the child could work and do it. All right. So, and this is the era that we call in economics mass production. Okay. And with mass production, we entered the consumer era. Do you understand what I mean by consumer era? Okay. Because as long as we could only make one shirt after another, and each child had to make the whole shirt, the consumer market was one where most families had only one shirt. But with mass production, you were now able to, and so in New York, in 1900, we still had the average family, one shirt. In 1900, everybody in the family had an average of one shirt and one pair of shoes. In 1900, that's only 100 years ago. Okay? All right. This is what we will later on call the era of scarcity. But here is the first example where we move from scarcity through mass production to surplus, as we will see. Here, you already see what is happening to the technology. A large factory, more machinery, but fewer people. But it's still belt-driven. Do you know what I mean by belt-driven and not motor-driven? I will show what I mean here. You see the belts that are going back and forth? They were belt-driven. Not each machine did not have its own motor. But we also see the factory has gotten bigger and the number of people in it smaller. Here's the best example of belt-driven. Look at this large machine. Belt-driven, no motor. All right. What we saw in this development was that that as factories grew, the number of workers grew, but they always grew in proportion, which meant that the output that you made was no greater. You just were in a different factory. So we produced more, but we did not produce more efficiently. That moved it on to quickly to where the factory began to look like that. And that is the famous factory by Henry Ford in Detroit. And that was big time. Everything in it was with motor-driven, electric-driven. And that became the symbol of what factory life was like. Okay, and with that, we have moved from an era of what I call scarcity to suddenly, in the United States today, the average family may have 20 shirts per person and 5 pairs of shoes. And what we begin to see is in this transition, things that look like this. Here is a grocery store at the turn of the century. Here is a grocery store that we see today. We moved from scarcity to surplus, more than we need. In fact, don't know what it was like in Poland the last year, but in Vienna, if you wanted to see the difference that the pandemic made, you would not find it in Carrefour, or you would not find it in Interspar. These stores were loaded with goods, loaded. There was enough to eat. There was enough surplus stuff in it. You would never know by going into one of these large supermarkets that there was a pandemic on. We live in a world of surplus. We may not be well, but we don't lack anything. The only people that lack something are the people that we call on poverty level, and we'll talk about that. But the fact is that we've moved from scarcity to surplus, and the question is, where do we go from here? Now, the economy and the political economy says we go from here by just making you consume more. And we'll find out what the result of that is. But there is a limit. And if we're going to employ all those robots and all those women and all those children or young people after 16, we're going to have to consume an awful lot. So we go on. Here's what an automobile dealer looked like in 1930. Look at this. This is what I saw. This is an automobile dealer today. And today, when I came here by car, what is that stretch that we drove to the mantle? Now, what economy? In what economy does it make sense that dealers have 500,000 cars standing in front of their dealership? I mean, think about it. Who would want an economy where you have 500, and that's cars that are not sold? Then all around this city, do you know that the average car in Poland is only in use 18% of the time? If you drive to work, it gets to be 23. And if you drive children around, it reaches 35. How can you have an economy with, there are 50 million cars for 38 million people standing around everywhere.
It's an overconsumption.
Pardon me?
It's an overconsumption, like a psychological part of the human, that we need to consume more and more, even if we have enough.
Okay. But at what point, and so there's no future to that. And again, in much of the underdeveloped world, they're skipping over that. You don't own your own automobile. The cars are either owned municipally and are robot-driven. And now I get to a point that Boris was talking about during lunch today. In cities like Kuwait and Singapore, you're not allowed to drive a private car into the city anymore. Only robot cars can drive in. Why? Come on. Why? What?
It's more safety.
No, well, it could be, but that's not the main reason. They eliminated all parking. We don't need the parking because the robot car drives in and automatically drives out. If you want to stop it, you can stop it. It gets in, but no car parks in the central city. There's no more. Okay, what do they do with these new spaces? In Singapore, they're building vertical farms right in the city. The whole nature of what a city looks like is transitioning. We think cities must look like this, but there are places like Kuwait and Singapore that are way ahead in their thinking about what a modern city is like. And it doesn't include the right to have a private automobile drive into the city. All right. So we've tied up our resources and things that stand around. You understand, no factory. If you were a manager in a factory and you wanted to buy a piece of equipment and you told the board of directors that equipment costs $1 million, but you're only going to use it 25% of the time, you'd have no chance at all to buy that. But as a private individual, it doesn't bother you at all. You spend $30,000, $40,000 on a car, and even if you use it only 25% of the time, that's okay. All right. That gets us to this triangle. Are you familiar with, how many of you are familiar with this triangle? Okay, that's our friend Maslow, right? Now, Maslow early on recognized that we have a hierarchy of needs. And our biggest hierarchy, the red line on the bottom, was in the area of scarcity, when we had only one shoe, one shirt, and not a sure place to live. Then what our needs were very clear. And we responded to those needs. And those needs gave us what? Jobs. They created factories to meet the mass production, to meet our needs. So that was the era, as I showed you, of factories. And by the way, do you have an idea how many, what percent of the U.S. working population now actually works in industrial plants and factories?
25 to 20%.
Oh, it's down to 12%. Imagine only 12% of the working population now works in a factory. About nearly 78% does what? We call them white collar, or we call them service economy. And that's all what you're mostly going to be in. And this is what is called the service economy. We'll talk about that. But anyway, as we moved up the triangle, all the way up to the level of love and belonging, which is what the first three levels, and those are defined as lower level needs. That is, red and orange and yellow are lower level needs based on praise from others. That is, we have them because others will see we have them, and we will feel that we are gratified by that. And most of us still live in an era where that is important, and especially, as I said earlier, from people that came out of the period of the Soviet experiment with communism, they are still would like to experience the first three sensations. So I want a new shirt, and I want it good looking, because everybody will know it's good looking, and that makes me feel good. Okay, so but where are we headed? Is there a future for the next 50 or 100 years by remaining in those first three levels? If we remain there, then we will remain in the level of the robot, because the robot will be able to produce almost everything that is necessary for us to experience that sensation. We go up to the next two levels. Esteem and self-actualization is what Maslow called it. And that is defined, upper level needs are for self-respect and are based on self-praise, not praise from others, self-praise, and internal feelings of accomplishment. I don't know if I may single myself out, but I think I fall in there. I'm here voluntarily. Nobody, I don't have to be here. Nobody told me how to make this presentation. And I really didn't care about whether you like my suspenders or not. I came the way I wanted to come. And when I look at you and I think you are picking up something from me, I have a sense of accomplishment. And that is what work, whether the robot will get to that stage, we don't know. As this gentleman said, I don't know how far they'll go, but at least I know if there were 20 robots in here now, and I hope when they're here in 30 years, I will still know that my doing what I'm doing has made me distinctly human. So, but how do we live up there? How do we live? How do we get compensated? That is important for you to understand the English word compensated. I don't know how we say compensated in Polish. But compensated does not mean pay. You understand what pay is, all of you. Compensated does not mean pay alone. Does anybody know the English well enough to be able to tell me what compensated means?
Satisfaction. Satisfaction, maybe.
Not quite.
Gratification.
Pardon me?
Gratification.
Okay. It could be. Let me help. In the job economy or market economy, to be compensated has become to be paid a wage. Sometimes when you retire and you're 65 in America, they compensate you by giving you a watch as a present that you worked for 45 years here. So you get something in addition to your wage, a watch for retirement.
So it's some kind of receiving some goods, some money, or some things for something you do. It's not must be money. It's
How many of you know what a Nobel Prize is? Okay. You understand a Nobel Prize is a compensation. A scientist worked for 20 years, he discovered something, and the people in Sweden decide to give him a gold prize and $250,000. He's being compensated. It's not that he had a job, it's not that he was promised pay. He never knew that he would be selected by the committee for a prize. He did research work in the lab. And one day he gets a message from Sweden and says, your name has been picked for he has been compensated. All right? Or in sports, in the Olympics, you go ahead, you don't know you're going to win or lose, but whoever wins gets a gold medal. He has been compensated. So this notion of compensation will become more important in the future, because many of us will not be earning money. We cannot say we are compensated because I earn 1,500 zloty a month. You won't earn 1,500. You won't earn any zloty per month. How do I live? I'll get to that. But zloty will not be this, will not get you to esteem. If you're still working at zlotys in that lower level, you'll be working right alongside the robot, and you'll be never sure what what your status vis-a-vis that robot is. Let's go on. Because what do we produce? So we went from an industrial economy to a service economy. What is it that keeps this economy going in an era of surplus? How do we, well, here's how we keep going. All we have to do is come up with a better pair of eyeglasses. Do you know how large the eyeglass industry is in the United States? How many would guess at how large? Just producing these fancy eyeglasses. Because we produce enough food, there's not any more food. We have enough cars, there's not enough cars. There are enough shoes. We got to find other things to produce because people want to earn money. And so the guy says, oh, well, then I'll invent a better eyeglass. You know how many, how large, just producing eyeglasses is, how large in dollars?
About 100 billions.
No, it's maybe too large. But,
100 billions.
But that's too small. It's about a $6 billion industry and employs about 38,000 people. Some making the glass, some making the frame, some in stores selling the glass. 38,000 people go home and say, look, I have earned my money. How? Somewhere in this chain of making sunglasses. And we are told you got to make more sunglasses because you got to keep the consumer buying these, otherwise you won't be taking your money home. So we make the glasses, when possible, with frames that do what? Break. My wife's frames break every 6 months, and we have to go and get another pair of frames. And so we have an industry which thrives on you're buying these glasses, and you want people to buy these glasses that break because they are paying you. Otherwise, you wouldn't have any money to go home with them. All right? So we need more glasses like this. And believe it or not, eyeglasses are a fast-growing sector. Do you know that the rate of growth of an economy sometimes is measured by GDP? You know that? Right? GDP? Oh, am I saying that correctly? Okay. Well, the GDP in Europe, if you have a 3% or 3.2, we think we have a great growth factor. Do you know what the growth factor is for eyeglasses? 11%. It's a fast-growing industry, better than the GDP. But if we don't want eyeglasses, then here is something that is also fast-growing. Okay, I don't need to explain what that is. Or here is one of the fastest growing opportunities for jobs, casinos. Casinos are growing everywhere. They're growing in Austria. I passed a casino on the way here. In America, casinos, and having a job in a casino, whether you give out the cards or whatever you do, that's a job. You get paid for it. Why? Well, we don't need you in anything else. What else is there? So we've got to keep all those people busy. Remember I said we're going to have everybody, all women working, all children, all younger men working, all people working, and all those robots working. We got to figure out what we're going to do with them. Casinos, this or that. Or if we don't like casinos, here is one of the fastest growing. You know what that is? The what?
Video games.
Video gaming. It is growing at 18% per year. Do you know how big it already is? It's at 25 billion. 25. It has over 100,000 people who earn their money working jobs, either writing programs or somehow, okay. And I'm not talking about, these are games. Gaming, which is gambling on the internet, is growing vastly too. Millions of people spend their days sitting at home and gambling on the internet. That's our new livelihood. It's a new way of earning our keep, at least at this stage. Now, let me open up this, and here I may need some help. Let me see if I can do it myself. I want this market sector. Let's go down here and go to J. Where is J? There's J. And then we'll go to Poland. And market sector for jobs. There it is. Okay, I've listed what in America and much of Europe has become how we earn our livelihood. I've got to make that larger.
Yes, yes, small.
I want you to see how we earn, how American economy thrives. Nail salons. That's places where ladies go to have their fingernails done. That's a growth industry. Nail salons. It is a $4.4 billion industry. Amazingly large, growing at 13%. Eyelashes, a growing industry in America. 1.5, and it's skateboarding, golf, cannabis, recreational marijuana, video games, fireworks, gambling. Just to give you an idea, entertainment in America, $479 billion for people who are engaged in entertainment work. Motorsports, you know what I mean by motorsports, NASCAR and all of that, also a growth industry. World wrestling, do you know what world wrestling is? It's a sport where you wrestle. Growth industry, 5.7 billions for people who are engaged in wrestling. Karaoke, do you know what karaoke dancing is? A big industry, NASCAR, biker festivals on motorbikes, amusement theme parks like Disney, cheerleading. Do you know what cheerleading is? Between acts of ballpark where the girls go. Big industry, much money to be made in jobs in cheerleading in America. Celebrities, do you know what celebrities are? Yeah. Can you imagine that being a celebrity is an industry that is worth 10 billion? Why? Celebrities need special dresses, they need publicists, they create all kinds of things that give us money so that we can live. Sunglasses we talk, but here's a neat one for Europe. The fastest growing, even faster than America and Europe, are tattoos. It is a fast growing, when I sit outside in Katowice, and we live in a place where there are outdoor cafes, and I sit and watch. There isn't a woman that goes by, or a particular woman, that doesn't have somewhere on her body a tattoo. Great growing business. So you understand that what we've done is gone from that primitive picture of slaves to a point where now, in order to live, we go ahead and we get tattoos. 38,000 jobs in Europe. 38,000 jobs in Europe, just going ahead and painting other people's bodies. All right. So, and by the way, the first robots are beginning to do that, and they're doing it very nicely. So there's okay, not any long-range future for tattooing for humans. So you understand that the nature of work is changing, but it has really begun to change in the last 20 years on the impact of technology. And we will talk now about the impact. I've talked already about this impact that technology will have on how we work. Some of that you've already read about. The notion that we needed to work in office buildings is passé. But the real estate interests and the city fathers' commercial interests for taxes has kept going, building higher and higher office buildings with people sitting in office buildings. Now, that wasn't necessary even 30 years ago, but we have that drive that we needed to show that the city is prospering. And the only way we can show a city prospers is if it builds buildings. And in Dubai, they must be higher than any other building, because we are proud that Dubai has the tallest building, and America no longer has the Empire State Building, the tallest. That phenomenon has driven us for all of these years. It makes no economic sense, but it fulfills the bottom levels of that triangle. But the pandemic has jarred that. It was inevitable in any way. Today, 40% of the office buildings in the in Manhattan are empty. And people like Warren Buffett, who knows Warren Buffett, who owns a good portion of the buildings in Manhattan, says the future for these buildings as offices is over. It should have been over a long time ago. You're going to do what is necessary. Maybe you'll go to the office once a week. Chances are you're going to do it at home or in a neighborhood remote office area. What we still don't clearly see is a larger change. Not only is the work shifted, as I call it, gig or whatever, into the home, the household where you live, the family in that setting, is the future factory. That is where most of the economy in the next 50 years will shift. It already has shifted. When I want a theater ticket, I don't go down and talk to a person who sold the ticket and who earned money for selling the ticket. I sit at home and my wife works on trying to get the ticket for us. If I want an airline ticket, I don't go to the airline any longer where there was a person who filled out the ticket. Danuta goes, looks up, and she prints the ticket. If I need a prescription, for which I do, I'm older, I get some prescriptions. I don't see the doctor. Doctor says, don't come in to see me. I'll send a prescription to the pharmacy, and the pharmacy has somebody on a bicycle or my wife deliver the thing. That is just the beginning. We have also had an experiment with shifting education from children into the home. But the big thing that's going to occur is when we have 3D and 4D printing. And you either have your own printer or there will be, just the way we now have paper print shops, shops that print this. You will be at home, you will design your own shoe. Adidas makes that already possible. You'll print and push the print button, and there is a neighborhood store, and it prints your shoe, and you pick up your shoe. You, at home, will become the new productive unit. Almost all of the important activities, economic, will take place in the home. Now, that is not unusual. In 1600, we did the same. In 1600, the family lived in a small house, the animals lived inside the house, and everything took place inside the house. It was only in the last 200 and 300 years that we shifted things out of the house into factories and into shopping malls. But shopping malls are closing. You would not know that here. But my brother owned 40 shopping malls, and he sold them while it was still good. Most of the big stores are pulling out of shopping malls. Why? Because Amazon has got the shopping malls beat. So we are shifting into a new economy, and we don't see that clearly. And that's the reason why all of the changes that I'm talking about don't seem real, because we try to put the changes that I'm talking about into this economy. Gig doesn't fit well in this economy, but this economy is over. In 2050, we won't even recognize it. If you lived in 1700 in an economy, 1700, would you believe there were cars, 500,000 in dealers, and 50 million of them parked in front of houses? Now, nobody would have believed that in 1700 because it didn't make sense in 1700 in the economy. And this economy doesn't make sense either because we can't see the next one. But it can't look like this. It can't look like that. So now you see, now Poland and some of the Central European countries can try to go through this era. You can have more tattoos, you can have more sunglasses, you can have more cheerleaders, you can have more karaoke dancers. Maybe Poland has to go through that phase. I'm saying, however, the African economies are skipping this phase. So, let's go on. There is, for those people who prefer to read something, this World Economic Forum report, let me see if I can open that quickly. let's see, help me find that. We go here. World Economic Report, Poland. This report, it's called Toward an Innovative Poland, the Entrepreneurial Discovery Process in Business, shows you how far behind even the World Bank thinking is. The World Bank is still talking about creating jobs. They somehow think that we got to get everybody into a job. If we don't get everybody working on jobs, okay. So even organizations the size of the World Bank still are locked in to an economy that we're now living in. So there's, okay. But I thought I'd bring to your attention the document to show you what the thinking, at least the traditional thinking, remains. In a couple of minutes, we'll take a break, if you wish. Now, marginalizing social benefits from quantitative growth. Maybe that is, let me find that. Let me see, where is that? Colloquium future of work, marginal reality, visionary writers, volunteering, World Bank, let me try to find it here. Marginalizing future of work, visionary, volunteering work report. Bear with me just one moment. Let's see, okay, it might be under 3. Marginalizing. No, it says it's got to be here someplace. Go back. Nope, that's not what I wanted to do. Go back here to 4, maybe it's sitting in 4. We may have to do that. Okay. I wanted to show you something. It'll take me a moment to find it. Maybe now is the time for a 5-minute break. Do we need a break?
Yes.
Okay, somebody said yes. So let's make it a 5-minute break. I take the risk that you won't come back. But we'll take a 5-minute break, and I'll find my document. All right. Now I found the document that I wanted to say. Of all of the growth activities in the American...
Wait.
Of all of the growth prospects for the American economy, because we are under the same pressure. Our politicians say we need 3-4% to get everybody on a job. And the European Union says we need 3 or 4% to get every... We've got this pressure that all of you have got to get a job. And so I've listed some of the ways before that the American economy keeps creating jobs. But then what I'm now talking about is nothing comes close to creating jobs than this. Self-inflicted harmful activity. You know what that is? Do you? I don't see it. I knew that. What is self-inflicted? Schmerzen, die wir uns selber machen, wie wir leben.
Znaczy tutaj chodzi o to, że sami sobie żyją swoim życiem, sprawiamy sobie ból, ale albo będziemy mieć różne dolegliwości przez styl naszego życia.
Let me give you an example. Mental health disorders. You know what mental health disorders are?
Yes.
Disorders that we have here. Mental health disorders is the fastest growing disease sector in America, but it is the fastest growing sector for jobs in America. For everybody that has a disease here is mentally disordered. We need doctors, we need nurses, we need tablets, treatment tablets, we need asylums. And so mental health illness, and the sicker we make ourselves, the more jobs we create. So you understand, all of you need to become sick here, and you will create jobs for other people. That's what we're doing. But if it were only mental illness, which is big, look at the size. Mental illness alone creates $79 billion for the economy. You understand that? 70, just because you're getting mentally ill. So all of you have to do your part, get mentally ill. But if that's not enough, the share of Americans reporting a day is bad. Do you ever have things you call a bad day, you feel, bad day? The number of bad day mental health has doubled in the last 25 years. More and more Americans are having bad days. 43.8 million of them are having bad days. In a given year, 9.8 million, or 4%, are seriously mental ill. That means they must see doctors constantly or they are in asylums. And the biggest portion of them, 1 in 5, is a young person 13 to 18 years old. So in America, if you're 13 to 18 years old, you are among the highest suicide rates and the highest mental disorder rates. But Europe is catching up. In Europe, mental disorders are the largest contributor to chronic conditions in the population. Do you understand what that means? I don't know, I'm looking at you.
Yes.
1 in every 4 of you are prone to become mentally ill. and create jobs for other people who need to take care of you. That's what's coming. But if that were not enough, let me show you what else creates jobs. Psychological violence. Do you know what that is? Yes. You live in a home, the man hits the woman hits the children, or somebody hits somebody else. Psychological violence is growing in Europe, and it's growing in America. Wow.
Psychological violence in social media is growing. This is the faster that is growing in the world.
Okay. But let's go on. In the U.S., this violence against women, just women, is almost a $6 billion industry where women see doctors, psychologists, and others from abuse. But another job creating is substance abuse. 10 million Americans are addicted to one kind of opioid or another. All need tablets, all need doctors, all need hospitals. Great opportunity for jobs. Overdose deaths in 2014, there were, that's the data that when I prepared this, were about 8,000. It's now 15,000 people. And that creates jobs. Do you know when you die how you create a job? You need a death, you go and you need a death certificate, right? The certificate that you died. And so there's somebody in the office who has a job and fills out these death certificates that have to be all filled out. Now, when you die, you call up and somebody has to put your body someplace. So there comes an ambulance and it takes the body away, and that's a job. And now the body has to lay until you go to a funeral parlor, right? And meanwhile you decide, what do I do with this dead body? Oh, I think I'll burn it. So the people who burn the bodies have a job. But now that you got the ashes, you need the ashes in an urn. You know, you put the ashes. There's a job for people who make urns for ashes. And so you have a supply line. And at the end is the rabbi. The rabbi comes right, and he goes like this, and he has to say some nice words. But the rabbi has concern. You know what the rabbi's concern is? There are now robot rabbis. Yes, robot rabbis. And robot priesthood. And roboid, what do they call it in the Muslim religion? We can now have a robot make you cry. When the robot talks about who died is, you will have tears. It's a whole new industry. Creates jobs. So all we need to do is have more of you die from early ages in addiction. But that's just the beginning. Let's go on with also. Obesity. Do you know what obesity is? Would you know that obesity is the third largest disease in America today? Third largest. Obesity leads to diabetes. It leads to all kinds of things. Why not? The stores are full. We have surpluses. We are earning money, and we become obese, and that creates what? Jobs. We need clothing, extra clothing. We need all of the kinds of things. On a recent trip, I went to America and I came back. I'll show you with the picture in a minute. Motor vehicle crashes. Imagine in America, we have $870 billion with more than 1.5 million jobs because we have auto crashes. So all we need is more accidents on the road and we can create jobs. But if that were not enough, more jobs can be created. But let me go down here. Close, where is this? Close.
That is the medical system not creating this closing system of jobs or using the patient. For example, patient innocently broke his arm, leg, whatever. And doctor says, okay, you will have the oxycodone to stop the pain. Patient gives addiction from oxycodone and then he needs to pay for a drug specialist to close this addiction.
Okay.
It looks like a closed system that makes manual.
Well, the point is that it's our lifestyle we're creating these jobs. The opioid industry found a niche, and we were, like nails and all the other niches we found a niche. And that niche makes all of these niches. For example, sports. All of us engage in sports, right? I mean, we all play sports. But professional sports take a lot of beating. You know that the cost to the society from professional sports people when they are 40, 50, and 60 and feel the damage that was done when they were 20 is, again, $25 billion industry. Football players like this, when they're 45, say my back hurts or this hurts, and we have sports medicine. So what do? Do we stop with football?
No, but this the example that I provided on the slide where wantedly put the patient in addiction from opioids.
Well, I'm not sure whether we want, but leave that example. The point is that throughout the society, we are living in a time when we live c'est la vie, and c'est la vie creates that. Where you go in the United States, you go someplace, that's what the figures look like at the end. And more of them I see where do we live? On Mariaska?
Mariacka.
If you stand on Mariaska, 1 in every 5, 6 people that go by look like that. And that is the future of work for us, because they'll need doctors, nurses, and hospitals. So whether we will get that work or whether a robot gets that work, we don't know. But right now, if you want to look for near-term opportunities to work, nothing beats the healthcare sector for growth. Self-inflicted growth. All right. How many of you have heard of Maynard Keynes? Okay. Now, Maynard Keynes, and I'm paraphrasing him, had among what he called the moral virtues. And by the way, Adam Smith also talked about the moral virtues that go with an economy. What we've done is we've ignored the moral portions of their teaching and end up taking what? Those portions of the economy which we think we can earn money on. Okay, so the neoliberals say, leave the economy alone. Adam Smith somehow said there's a magic hand. All of you have heard about the magic hand? And let this thing go, okay? The part that he wrote about in order for this to work, there need to be what is one of the most essential aspects of this market that goes like that, from a moral perspective, that he wrote over Keynes and Adam Smith. What do we need? The word trust. The word trust was an important word in the early writings of these. Whether you read Ricardo, the trust function has been eliminated out of the economy. I don't think anybody who takes a course in economy takes a course in trust. They learn what? Supply and demand, break even, and a dozen other laws. They learn the Phillips curve. I don't know if you know the Phillips curve. Oken's law. I don't know if you know Oken's law. But these are the things I learned when I studied economics. I'm sure they must appear in your... So, now I wanted to show you this. I put together a list of books. The earliest one is David Ricardo. That's the book that's way in the background. These are a series of books I've selected, which all have given us some insight into what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about isn't new. If you read Ricardo, he already talks about the machine age and its impact. But the critics say, look, Ricardo hasn't all come true. And I'm going to ask in a minute why. But the statement is not correct. Keynes already talked in 1940 about what? The prospect of leisure, he called it, in a society where more and more people have free time. What do we do with leisure? And so here is a succession of books by writers who have all thought about this subject and who all saw clearly the transition that is taking place in the economy. I might say that I am a man who has a little bit of this top portion of the pyramid, and so I included my book in this. And you will see somewhere in the middle a book which says Beyond Jobs, and that's the book that I wrote about the era as jobs dwindle. But let's look at these people. There is Ricardo. Here is what Maynard Keynes had to say. I just mentioned him to you. The outstanding faults of the economic society in which we live are its failure. I think you know what failure means, right? Failure. Its failure to provide full employment and its arbitrary, inequitable distribution of wealth. Okay? He already saw that it will be difficult for all of us to find in the economy paying jobs. But work doesn't go away. The Club of Rome, I don't know if you're familiar with the Club of Rome, it's a famous organization, wrote The Limits of Growth. They already then said in 72 that this idea that we all will have jobs and earn money forever in a job economy does not work. My friend Rifkin wrote a book with The End of Work. Now, what's wrong with that title? The End of Work, what's wrong with that?
Work never ends.
Work never ends. And I wrote the publisher and says it's nonsense. There's no end to work. What he meant is there's the end of paid work. In my book, I call it Beyond Jobs. the era when paid work, maybe, as we now in. But we can keep trying to figure out niches. Remember, we can keep fingernails, eyelashes, sunglasses. We can keep trying to find work. It's a limit to that. Especially when other smart things are beginning to take that work away from us. So it's not the end of work. My friend Timothy Jackson, all right, wrote here, Prosperity Without Growth. That's a book that we all should study. It says we can be prosperous if we define what prosperous is, okay? Prosperous, being compensated, if we figure out what's really important for us. Is it really important that all of us own our own automobile? And I say, if you ask that question in contemporary society of present-day car owners, the answer is yes. But you don't matter, because we will all be gone. I'm a little bit before you, but we will all be gone, because the next generation will never know that people own their own cars, because the next generation never knew that everybody had a horse. We're still locked in thinking in terms of this society. But it doesn't make sense that there are 50 million cars and they're 50 most of the time standing around. No society can function like that forever. I think that if Poland had 10 million cars and they were robot cars, and every time you wanted a car, you go like this, the robot car's outside, and it takes you, it's good enough. Why do you need to have it parked in front of your house? Let's go on. Okay. So there is the gentleman that's before you with his book. You notice the picture. Who recognizes that picture? Who recognizes this picture? Anybody? The President of France. And what's the President of France doing?
Holding a robot baby.
Holding a robot baby. Now, why do you think the President of France would hold a robot baby?
Some kind of metaphor?
Yes. The metaphor is clear. He says to the robot baby, you are our future.
Born of new technology.
What?
Born of new technology.
You are our future. He doesn't hold a live baby from our sort. He holds a robot and says to France, France's future is there. I don't know if that's exactly the case, but at least he recognizes that there's a change taking place in much of Europe. And when I meet with the Chancellor of Austria, and I will be meeting with the Chancellor when I return, I told him, he gives me 5 minutes. The Chancellor is very busy, and he says, Bill, 5 minutes. So in 5 minutes, I try to do what I've done here in 2 hours. And then he goes and makes a speech on television, and you know what he says? He's going to find jobs for everybody that's unemployed. Now I don't think that the people who hear that believe it. I don't believe it. But the politics, the geopolitics is still, we got to get all of you into a job. Let's go on. All right. As I mentioned, there is much work to be done. You know, in the United States, there are 50 million Americans who report that they do volunteer work. there is enough work. These are 50 million people that do, you know what I mean by volunteer work? It's work that you do willingly. You either do it, not, you choose to do it or not, and you may not get paid for it. Or sometimes you get your expenses paid, but not paid for it. 50 million Americans do volunteer work. And every survey shows that there is a higher level of satisfaction that people get when they volunteer work than when they work in jobs. In jobs, typically 1/3 of the people, when surveyed, are you satisfied with your job? Would you do your job if you had another job? Almost 1/3, and almost survey in Europe and America and say, if I had choice, I wouldn't do this job. But then it's less than 5% for people who do volunteer work. Because they can leave and go wherever else they need a volunteer. And they can use their talents. So the volunteer sector in America contributes to about 8% of the equivalent of GDP. The number of workers that are in volunteer work increase faster than the number of workers that increase in market work. Again, the question is, if you're young in family, how do we live from volunteer work? We'll have to talk about that. But the point is, it's a new idea for many. It's been an old idea for a long time, a growth. In the United States, we went so far as to create a ministry at the highest level. There is Obama, and right under Obama was a minister, and he was the minister, it's called the Ministry of National, a Corporation of National and Community Development. It's a vast organization. It has the main groups under it are something called the Peace Corps. I was in the Peace Corps. There are about in America several million young people, not just young, who work all over the world as a volunteer. I worked in Ukraine. Okay. So there's another segment called Vista. That's for all people who would like to do something and will have free time. In America, there are 25 million Vista workers. They work in all kinds of volunteer capacities. And then we have SCORE, another volunteer program for retired executives, people who were managers, accountants, and so, and they help new organizations that can't afford professional help, but get this professional help from top flight former managers of corporations. So Europe has, Austria has a reasonably good organization, but no country in Europe is as well structured to integrate people into useful. So you understand the work that these volunteers do is the essence. 25 million Americans work in what we call soup kitchens. During the epidemic, they went around from house to house and delivered food to people who needed food and who did not go out. 25 million people who did that voluntarily. We could not live in the wage economy. You understand, the market economy could not survive if it weren't for the volunteer economy in the United States. Now, there is a bit of sad news. No, maybe it's not sad, but maybe it's there is a survey which I will show you, and a report on voluntarism in Poland. And while you were at an early history of volunteer before the partition, after the partition, but during the period of the Soviet economy, the notion of volunteer work stopped. Almost no volunteer work was done during the communist period. And since then, Poland ranks extremely low, one of the lowest rated in the OEC in terms of the number of hours that people in Poland do voluntary work. And then a report gives reasons why that is the case. But I am saying that that eventually must change, because that is where the future work is. The robots won't be doing that kind of work. And if you stick too long with the robot work, you won't have a chance. So there is some transformation that in thinking about what the nature and value of volunteer work is. I'll show you the reference to the report if you're interested. But shadow work and household work I've already discussed. That is the work that is more and more shifted into the home. The factories, the offices, work is closing. Not all of it, of course, but a large segment of it gets shifted into the home, and the household becomes the new productive center. I want to talk about these last two. They're extremely important. We talk a lot about innovation. I think everybody knows the word innovation. Most of the innovation that we read about or that we see is in the market sector. So we want to build a better battery so that we can have electric cars. Okay, innovation. We have, but the real opportunities for work are in a sector which is increasingly called social innovation. It is innovation which is outside the market. It doesn't have to be, but usually is. And it is designed to increase the quality and well-being of life in civil society. So the goods and services are goods and services which make life individually better. The market economy may produce the food, they may produce the cars, if they're whatever, but the one I have already mentioned to you before, urban farming. Are any of you familiar with what I mean by urban farming? The question is, if we don't need garages in the inner city, we close all the garages, and if we need fewer spaces for office, what do we do with the city? And the question is, why don't we have urban farms? An urban farm is a farm which is a vertical farm. Have you seen vertical farms?
In Holland. In Holland.
Holland has many of them, but they haven't seen them. A vertical farm is an area, maybe 1 square hectare, half a hectare, and it's built just like a building is built. You grow food up. There's no reason why you need to spread out the fruit. Why must the tomatoes be from here to there and large? Let the tomatoes grow like this. Okay. In Holland and in Amsterdam, Holland used to import its produce. Import produce. because they didn't have enough space to grow it. Holland now exports produce. Where does it grow that? Right in the city. It has farms that go up and up and up. It's a social innovation. Moreover, the people in the cities feel more associated with the land. They go out and they don't see one building after another. They see a building from which things grow, just the way they used to when they lived out in the country. There are a list, if you look on the internet, on the social innovations, and where do these social innovations come from? They come from here, right? It's an idea. And most of them come from people like you. There are organizations with the name of Ashoka, means nothing to you, where young people like this meet regularly. In Vienna, I'm a member of that. And they sit around and talk about what would be an interesting project, social innovation project. And they come up with an idea to improve the well-being. We have a canal. The canal is dirty. It only drains things. In the past, it wasn't important for barges. And now people get together and say, what can we do with this canal? It looks dirty. The city doesn't know what to do with it. Why don't we convert it to a parkway? A park where people can walk. We can take in a large part of a dirty old canal. The idea came from a few young people, and the city finances the cost of the renovation, and this group of people work in converting something which was an eyesore into something beautiful. So the idea of social innovation becomes an important way of introducing technology into the social sector without relying on industry to make it into cars or to make it into whatever else is made. I have a list of social innovation projects. Some of them are extremely interesting things that people, mostly young people, Ashoka, when you come, you present your idea as a project. You likely want to be the project manager. You write a business plan. All of you have learned how to write a business plan. You write a business plan for a social project. Ashoka goes out and helps to find financing. There are new financing mechanisms for social innovation. They're called green bonds. I don't know if you've learned about green bonds. And so many become social entrepreneurs. And the number of social entrepreneurs in Europe has grown. There are now 1.5 million people who call themselves social enterprises in Europe and managers of social enterprises. I call this the new third economy. We have had in the past the public economy. We've had our private economy. We are now in a new stage of developing a third economy. It's the social economy. How we develop the financing for that economy. Now, you know the market economy has banks, and the market economy has hedge funds and all sorts of ways of financing venture capital. The question is, how do we create a third economy, which is a social economy? And we need a whole new way of financing that economy. And that's what's in process for the next 20, 50, We're going to find new ways so that people can earn a livelihood, not just as volunteers, but as workers in a social enterprise engaged in social innovation, which brings people closer together and let the robots do whatever the robots can do well, but we find work that we invent for ourselves, which is good for our well-being and moves us up into that higher category of Maslow. Thank you. Any questions?
How will we measure, the value of this social work?
Yes. I skipped that. I should not have skipped that. Now, in the economy, which is called the market economy, how do we measure the market economy? Well, in aggregate, we can use GDP, and on a enterprise level, we call it profits. Right? That's what we do. Firm that has no profits. So aggregate. So that's the difference between macro and microeconomics. I think you know that. What do we do in social enterprises where there is no profit in motive for the business? And I will let me show you two of let's get back to J. Poland. And here under, where are you for? Here. No, that's not one. Okay. That's not what I want for a moment, just one more. Yeah, I have it. Here. This is called the Legatum Prosperity Index. You understand? It's not the profit index. It doesn't say how much profit and how much return to the investor profit. It's called the Prosperity Index by Legatum. And it goes through, just a moment. It goes through, this is the 2020 survey. I think it's what I wanted to show is on 16 or 15. This is a document, again, I think is worthy of reading. This will become the future. Let's see where it is, a little more. I'm getting close. And there's the table. It's the Legatum. This is the summary table. There it is. Let me explain the table. On the left column, you see the countries. there are 133 countries in which this survey was conducted. On top, you have the listings of what the survey looks at. Safety and security. That was the lowest level at the Maslow triangle, you recall. Personal freedom, governance, social capital, investment and environment. And so on top, living conditions, health, education, okay, and the natural environment. And so we measure that instead of measuring how much money there is in the bank. And if we use what's the term I'm thinking of? It'll come to me. But in any event, this is the equivalent of your return on the investment. You go out and you work in social enterprises, as I talked, do social innovation, and what is your return? Since you can't bring any money to the bank, but you can go ahead and we can look at which of these categories you contributed to. And that is the new form of compensation that I talked about. Now take a look just at some of the countries that are on top ranked. The top ranked country is what? Oh, come on. Top ranked country, can you see it? It's Denmark. And you look around and you can see the numbers. They're all small. They're all, in every category, it's either it's either 10th, 2nd, 3rd, 6th, 6th. Norway also manages to do very well. Switzerland, Sweden, Finland, there you have them, okay. I think Poland ranks here 36th. Yeah, and its worst category, 114, is in the category of social capital. Do you know what social capital means? Do we? Explain what social capital is to your students. Okay, you know what capital is, right? You all know the word capital. Most of the time when we think of capital, what do we think about? Money. Pardon me? Money and physical things. The four functions that Adam Smith identified were land, labor, capital. What did I skip? Land, labor, capital, and
Time.
oh, come on. Land, labor, capital. Think about it. But in any event, capital is thought of either in monetary terms or in physical terms. Okay? But we don't measure well-being in those terms. We measure well-being in social capital. Social capital is the capacity for humans to interact in a society in a mutually beneficial way. And that is what will give us and keep us distinct from robots. Whether robots will organize themselves and will make clubs for themselves and will have their own orchestras and will have their own living arrangements because they need to be someplace, or whether they will be integrated, I don't know. I think we will find limits to the extent we want that integration. But In order for us to survive with them, we need our own social capital. We'll need our own theaters. We need our own fellowships. And that is what social capital is about. How rich we are in terms of an interrelated civil society. Now, everything in the last post-communist period in Eastern Europe and so on has disintegrated to a large extent the integrating qualities that the socialists thought they could provide.
We need to learn to work together because our mindset is, we are focusing on ourselves, not on the community.
In any event, Poland is ranked among the lowest in its, as you saw in the legatum. Now, so that is one way that we can know about where a country stands and how it's growing. If Poland went from 36th to 25th to 15th, that would be the equivalent of a corporation increasing its return on investment. The other, let me close this. I shouldn't have done that. The other one is this index, this called the social, here it is. It's called the Social Progress Index. This index was developed by Michael Porter, Professor Michael Porter at Harvard University. It has been now adopted by many of the countries in Central America, South America, and Africa. These countries were saying, if you look at what we are and where we're going, don't look at our GDP, take a look at the Porter Index. So, and let me see if I can find quickly the table to the Porter Index. Here, the Social Progress Index and on his index, Norway and Denmark again appear on top. It's an entirely different measurement, but on both measurement techniques, Denmark, Finland. Here on this one, New Zealand comes in early, and Switzerland is a little lower. Australia is high. Iceland, Netherlands, Germany, and Japan are among the highest ranked with the scores. They are called the number 1 tier countries. The 2-tier countries are countries like Austria, where I come from right now, Luxembourg, Korea, Spain, United Kingdom, Slovenia, Estonia. Come on, what did that happen? Oh, yeah. Why? Okay. The 3rd-tier country are countries like Croatia, Hungary, Argentina, Barbados, and Mauritius, Kuwait gives you an idea where the quality of life is ranked at these low levels. And the 4th-ranked countries are Peru, Colombia, Brazil, Mexico, Ukraine, Moldova, Russia. Pardon me? Yes. in the fourth tier countries, Cuba, Jordan, Jordan, Oman, I'm sorry. All right. Did I skip Poland here someplace? What?
Scroll back to the second tier.
Second tier?
One column to the left.
Oh.
One column to the left. Scroll up. And we are here.
There you are, 31. You're a little bit better on this index than you are on the legatum. One reason why you're better on this one, it doesn't include the social capital component. So when you say, how do we measure? There are measures, except they're not the financial measures that we're accustomed to in the market economy.
But we have to finance this non-market.
Pardon me?
But we have to finance this non-market economy. So where we can get the money?
All right. First, we need to be historical. We had to finance this economy. Back in 1700, we didn't have financing for automobiles, even if we had them. Okay? How did we finance this economy that we're living in? By and large, how did we finance the 19th, 18th, 19th, 20th century economy? Where did we get the resources? You understand, finance, if I give you this, Anuda has my wallet, I can't give you anything. Give me my wallet. It's a €20. Can you eat it? Can you drive a car with it? You can't do anything with it. It's just a piece of paper. I shouldn't do that. You know how much it costs to produce this piece of paper? 15 cents. And we don't need it because nobody in Africa has paper like this any longer. But Europe still has banks and uses this. In Africa, if you have your... What? No, the people who do this want their job. You don't understand. The printing industry that prints this thing is the union that supports it is fighting to hold on to this. This is what keeps me eating at home. If you take this job away from me, what will I do? So Europe is still way behind, still living in this old, but you know how Europe tries to enhance its economy so that you can live the way you now do? Or you all should know where the financing came from. The financing for Europe came out of 16 and 1700 exploration of the New World. Columbus made it possible. You went to America, you chopped the trees down and you brought them to England. And England built the Armada. The English Armada was built with trees that they didn't pay for. They just chopped down in America and transported them. A good portion of all of the European riches came back. Who financed? You know that Spain took enough gold from South America that they couldn't find warehouses to put the gold in Spain in 1600. That's what finance did. You took resources that you paid nothing for, and you became wealthy in Europe. So the point is, where did that come from? You managed to finance this economy. Now we got to figure out how we finance the new economy. Now, the new economy, we can't finance by taking things from colonies. The colonies don't exist, and they're not giving things away. So we got to find other ways to finance it. Okay? So we look around the present economy and say, what can we take from the present economy? Oh, Brazil found something. They developed a soda tax. You know what a soda tax is? They haven't learned about soda taxes. You know what a soda is?
Yeah.
Yes.
You do? Okay. If this were Coca-Cola, it would be what? A soda. And in Brazil, if you want to buy this soda, what do you have to do? You buy it and you pay a tax, just the way you pay a tax on cigarettes. And you pay a tax on gasoline, you pay a tax on soda. And suddenly, there is money available. You either stop drinking the soda, which is good for you, the health care costs go down, or you continue to drink the soda and you pay an extra 20 cents for every soda that you drink. Another, what don't we pay for now? All of the information that flows on the internet to me, I don't pay for. I pay for access, orange, but for everything I load down, I don't pay anything. In the future, information gets charged. You want to use it, you pay for it. So we find new ways, but we eliminate other payments. It doesn't make sense to tax wages. All of you, I presume, when you have a, what do they call it? It's got full, netto and brutto netto. Okay. So all of you have bruttos and nettos, and the difference is taken out. But if many of you no longer have jobs, why should brutto and netto exist for the few people who still have jobs? It won't be fair. People won't permit and say, I work and pay brutto and netto, but he doesn't work and gets money from the state for me. So brutto and netto have a limited lifespan. There was no brutto and netto in 1900. Brutto and netto came in America in 1903. So for a while we lived with brutto and netto. You work and pay part of your work into the tax system. That is over. I think we'll eliminate brutto and netto and we'll replace it with all sorts of new modes of taxation. Taxes on acquired capital, taxes on inheritances. There was all sorts of new ways that fit better with the new economy. Now, that gets to the question you didn't ask about basic income. So I'll talk about basic income for just a moment, because that would have been a question that my friend would have asked. How many of you heard about basic income? What have you heard about it?
What is that?
Have you heard, you said you heard about it. What did you hear about it?
About basic income?
Yeah.
That in Poland it's probably
There were some experiments in, let's say, Denmark,
Finland.
Basic income is
Norway,
money for nothing.
they pay
What?
for nothing.
Money for nothing.
Is that the way it's characterized?
No, more or less. You don't need to have job to obtain the salary, to obtain the money.
But job's not the only kind of work. I mentioned to you I know a family where the wife takes care of children, the husband is disabled, and one member of the family, the father, is 89 years old. Now tell me, there's nobody that I know that works harder.
Yes, this is work, but not the job.
That's the point. So we're going to have to learn how to pay for work also, not just for jobs.
But you mentioned this is money for nothing.
Well, okay, that he understood. He didn't mean nothing. It's just delusional.
Okay.
You understand that I am working right now, okay? And as they said, and all of us are doing work. Those volunteers, there's 50 million Americans, they're working very hard. And during the pandemic, they went out and fed people who had nothing to eat. So they're all working. So if I get a basic income, I get it for work. I don't need to have a job.
Yes.
Is that clear? The notion that basic income is for nothing is a misuse of the media, and it's a misuse by industry largely of propaganda. The Finland experiment, the Canadian experiment, and now there's an experiment in Berlin. We'll see what that shows. But all of the experiments, some lasted 10 years, one lasted 15 years, show that the people who received basic income were more engaged in work than they were before while they had a job. So, okay, the real question that we have to deal with is how to pay for it. Within the current economy structure, it is difficult to imagine that's how to do that. It doesn't fit well in. But this economy isn't the economy of the future. If we can eliminate from Poland 40 million cars, and from Europe, if we can eliminate 100 million cars, if we eliminate all dealerships, why do we need a dealership? In the United States, General Motors has a room that is this big. It's a virtual reality showroom, and I can drive any car that General Motors makes in a virtual reality showroom. I drive it. I can touch it with my virtual reality gloves, and when I stand on the accelerator and go on a curve, and I don't drive carefully, the car crashes. And not only that, I buy my car virtual. I can say I want this shape, and I want this shape, and the car is custom made for me. I don't have to stand 100 cars in front of a dealership. Now, if we eliminate all of these costly things that are wasteful and convert that capital for all those cars into a basic income, what's wrong with that? We've got to admit that likewise, the medical care costs in America are 20% of GDP. 20. In Europe, they're going to get to 25% of GDP. Why? Sports medicine, this medicine, that medicine, this. If we can reduce that, happen 10% of GDP, only for people who have heart attacks and so we have enough resources. We don't need to worry about how to pay. We've got to figure out how do we change the economy to an economy which makes more sense for the future. Have I helped? You look skeptical, Mark. Boris, you look skeptical.
You know that.
Okay. But you understand, we are wealthy, except we've tied the wealth up in things that we don't. Oh, if we can get rid of, you know, I ask you, how much food in Poland is wasted each year?
5 tons?
5 million tons.
9 million.
2 billion tons.
Nearly 20 million tons of food either got spoiled in stores or didn't get eaten or got spoiled at home. Imagine that. It's a vast amount. We are rich. We can, there's no country in Africa could waste so much food as Poland wastes. The problem isn't how to finance the basic economy. Financing, there's enough capital around. Cars, food wasted, and all of that. It's simply that we lived in an economy that went from scarcity to surplus, and we like the surplus. So if we have 5 dresses, we like 6. And if we like 1 coat, we like 2. Okay? And so, and that's natural, I suppose, in human being, but we are in a transitory stage. We're still living out of the past, which is a past of scarcity. At some point, you know that in America, the number of driver's licenses is declining. There are just few Americans, young Americans, that feel they need a driver's license. Without a driver's license, you don't need a car. So these transitions are in progress. It will be in further progress. But it isn't that we don't have the resources. It isn't like in 1800 and 1700 where we chopped down the trees and brought the gold back from South America. Okay? Yes.
I'm Justina. Thank you for the lecture. We saw it was an honor. And I have a thought during what you said. Isn't this pandemic time surprisingly helps us to push the idea of what you're talking about?
Of course.
It's hard time for us, but I think we've learned so much about our real needs. About cars, you've talked about cars. I was thinking about dresses and shoes. I wasn't buying those in a year or 2, let's say, and I still think I look quite nice without them. And maybe that's something good that we can derive from the pandemic period.
Well, let me make clear, I am not against dresses and shoes, right?
Me neither.
I am not against, and I am not against fashion, but I am against the economics. Fashion needs textiles.
Yes, textiles and people and so on.
Okay, well, I want to talk about textiles. You know that the making of textiles is the second largest contaminator in the environment. What's the first? Farming. Farming, the amount of contamination from cattle farms and other forms of farming. Vast. Making clothing, textile. Social innovation is finding new ways, new materials that we can make clothing that are less costly to the environment. So long as we have money, we don't care whether or not the shirt makes an end. And when you buy that orange shirt, did you care that that shirt added contamination to the environment? You look at it and say, I like the shirt, I'll take it. You have to have some money. Okay. That's okay in 1900. And it won't be okay in 2100 because that shirt won't be made from that textile. So we've got to understand that we're moving, we have to, that we're living in a costly way. And much of the reason we can do that is that the costs have been financed by taking it from one and using it for the other. And when that's no longer work, then the government, the political and economic government said, if you don't have a job, you don't eat. Okay, then I'll fix the nails, and I'll fix the nails, and I'll put glasses on, and then I can eat. Now think about it. Can that go on? How long can that go on? Okay, then I'll do a little more computer gaming. That'll help the economy also. A little bit of obesity, a little bit of sports so that my back doesn't break. It works, but it's no basis for the future, especially when these things that are coming have an indefinite lifespan. Maybe if my arm goes bad, I take the arm off and I put another arm on, and I'm working. My sensors stay good, and when this doesn't work, I connect to the cloud, and the cloud comes back. While you're figuring out something, I've already figured out it for 1,000 other people. That's what you're going to live in. So you've got to figure out whether fingernails doing this is going to go ahead and have you competitive with that kind of life.
And to summarize, I think that the most important thing is to change the mindset, and we need the time to do this, the changing of the generations.
Well, I hope I contributed to it.
Basically, the motivation too.
What?
Basically, we require the huge motivation too, because if not the information, some people would think, okay, yeah, we know it's bad, sorry, such life. And then others will really change their style, because from my experience, if people aren't want to change anything in their self, they don't do it 100%.
Well, remember, I am not the one who believes that I can change people's minds. There was a famous book when I was 23 years old. I came out, I was in the Korean War. And I came back from the war and I said, what do I do? I had studied chemistry. And so I was able to get a job selling industrial chemicals. And they sent me, I lived in New York all my immigrant years, to a place called Wisconsin. Now, I had heard of Wisconsin, but why do I want to go to Wisconsin? And there's a city there called Milwaukee. And so I find myself in Milwaukee, 23 years old, and I had let me have this, I had a suitcase, and I went from factory to factory and said, I have chemicals, I went, and everybody said, I'm sorry, I don't need them. And after 3 months of trying to sell chemicals, and not selling $1, what do you think I expected? In America, you get something called a pink slip. You know what pink is? This color?
Yes.
And when you get a pink slip, what does that mean? Do pobaczenia, goodbye. After 3 months, not selling anything, and they're paying my wages. How long do you think they will continue to pay wages to a person who doesn't sell anything? But I had luck. I worked for a man who recommended a book, and that gets to this point. The title of the book is Open the Mind, and then you can sell. So that is something we all need to learn. As long as our minds are closed, I know this car is better than that car. I know this politician is better than this one. I know this is better. Our minds are like this. And if I try to penetrate that mind with my ideas, I don't have a chance. I can't. You're a true believer. Believe. And I argue with you and argue. However, there are skillful ways that you can open the mind of people. Once I learned from that book how to do that, I became the number 2 salesman out of 100. We have to figure out, and that book, if you can ever find it in English, Open the Mind. How do we open the mind? Don't ever try to convince a closed mind of another idea. It's not possible. The mind is set and you cannot get your idea into it. So you've got to figure out, how do I get this person? And if you do that carefully with questions. How about that sales agent that sells you the product? What kind of guy is he? Okay. And what school did you go to? Oh, I went to the same school you did. Oh, really? And you play handball? Yeah, I play handball. And after the second visit, I found out the guy's open to me. I'm going, how have you been, Bill? How's your handball game? How is that? Why don't you tell me a little more about your product, Bill? Now I knew it. I opened the mind a little. He asked me about my product. I did not have to ask him to listen to my speech. Opening the mind is essential in social capital and social relations. But none of us go to school and ever have a textbook on how to open the mind. That's subjects we don't learn. And we learn a lot of other stuff, but we don't learn some of the essential elements that will make it important for us to live. So I am constantly trying to open minds. Until I have an open mind, I will not talk about basic income. If this gentleman were absolutely convinced that basic income is taking money away from the rich and giving it to the lazy poor, and he will believe that, I would not talk with him about that subject just now. Okay? But I sensed that he was a little open on the subject. Okay, what else can we do?
Wow, duration is wonderful, 3 hours. Thank you.
Okay, fellas. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Okay.
Myślałam, że no wiem, to właśnie nie wiedziałam, czy to będzie dobry pomysł, żebym go wyłączała sama.
Is there anything I can help you with now? disconnecting the stuff.
No, you can, let me close it. Just one.
You'll grade later.
Oh my! Oh! Oh my! Danuta, look at this.
Wow. Stop,
Oh my. Thank you. By the way, just a moment. You understand what this is? It's compensation.
Thank you. This is awesome. Thank you. Wow.